Good.
All right, great. We are just slightly after 3, so there's
Right, can you hear us? Helen, can you hear us? Great.
Now we can, yep.
all right, excellent. Still good? You can still hear us over here? Perfect. I love it. Thank you.
A few minutes.
Oh, all right. Have you gotten roll call in?
Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. You're a short but humorous delay. Let's open for public comment, and what we have is about 3 minutes for anyone in the general public who'd like to give comment to come on up, and please tell us anything on your mind related to AHAC. You would give us your name. Just, I believe the city needs that.
Yes, my name is John Halen, JOHNHEYLIN. I live in the city of Bend. I'm an employer in Bend, and I'm a lead for Bend YIMBY, which stands for Yes in My Backyard. I was really excited to see on the cover of Cascade Business News that Madras, which has a population of roughly 8,000, has about 1,000 units coming online or in the pipeline, which here would be the equivalent of maybe 12,000. If that were to happen here, maybe I'd be out of the job at YIMBY, which would be a great thing because it would free up a lot of time. Another part of the reason I'm here right now is because the tree code's coming through, and I think that's going to negatively impact housing production here in the city of Bend. I think because it's definitely going to pass because it's a political football, and no one wants to stand against it. I think there's 2 asks that could be made, and I think that are relevant to this committee. You could ask for an exemption for any development that has at least 30% affordable housing units, deed restricted. I think that would be nice. And also, yeah, I would also ask that there be a 1-year sunset on the law. So that way, if it is working, people can just vote it in again. And if it's not working, people can just ignore it and let it die a quiet death. Because if people are so leveraged that they have to sign this because they don't want to look like they're against trees, it's not going to be any different a year from now. It's not going to be any different 2 years from now. So I think a 1-year sunset would be great. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anyone else with public comments? Anyone online like to share some public comment? Not see the hands on my screen. There are none. All right, okay. Well, let's move on to approval, or I suppose not approval, of the May minutes. Has everyone had the chance to review them, or do you trust the minute takers? Yeah. Okay. Great. So is there any comments on the May minutes? Corrections requested? None. All right. Do I have a motion?
To make a motion to the May AHAC minutes as they are with no amendments.
Thank you. Second. Too close call. No, got it. That's the last one.
I'm gonna put it to Matt from Heather.
Okay, great.
All right.
All in favor? Aye. And Helen, your vote?
I wasn't present at the meeting. Am I allowed to vote?
You are, as long as you've reviewed them and you trust the veracity.
Okay, then I'm an aye. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm also an aye. Passes yes. Thank you.
I
Cruise-
was supposed to be picked for kids all last or something.
Yes. And now for a real highlight that I've been looking forward to, developer feedback on housing production. Rachel, can you kick us off?
Sure. I just wanted to introduce this topic. About a year ago, we kind of started off with looking at things outside of the affordable housing scope. And over the last couple months, we've heard from Dr. Colborn, who came to visit the city of Bend, and it was really, I think, insightful to learn about how housing production at almost every affordability level or beyond even market rate kind of impacts affordability and attainability in our community. And so we have continued in this past year and moving forward to kind of listen to our housing developers with regards to the barriers that they are seeing in developing housing. And so I'm going to kick it off for Carrie to give a little feedback on what has happened over the past year and how that pertains to you and your role moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Chair, committee. Good afternoon. I'm Carrie Bell, Middle Income Housing Coordinator for the City of Bend. So just some brief background. Starting about this time last year, the city had launched a pilot program, the Middle Income Housing Pilot Program. And as the city went through that process of launching that program that involved application for some funds that had been set aside, we also formed AHAC, a Middle Income Technical Advisory Committee to staff. And that advisory committee was made up of experts. Some of you sitting at the dais are on that team to help advise us on some of the direction and some of the other stakeholders in the community that we might need as we looked at how to best use these funds, and then also just to receive more feedback on barriers that our local developers are facing to making housing, market rate housing, pencil for that middle income household. So that's a brief background on how we got to the point of just involving our community, our development and building community, and sharing with us barriers, but also viable solutions. So then we had a stakeholder workshop last summer, and that's about 25 stakeholders that came to the workshop and shared not just their barriers or their complaints, but true viable solutions that they felt would help us move the needle and incentivize production of middle housing, both middle income as well as the missing middle product, which is often more attainable by size and design. And so with that effort, we certainly got the attention of council, or I should say you got the attention of council, as well as our management team really heard the concerns in our CEDD department. And at the direction of the city manager's office, an internal work group was formed, primarily made up of some managers from CEDD, as well as a member from our legal team, that really took that list that we had from the workshop that we had shared last summer and worked through vetting those solutions, those opportunities, just to see if there really was, areas that we could pursue. And so throughout this year, we've worked on that list, and we've had some real success with some low-hanging fruit. And there's some remaining items on that list that we project that we'll be bringing back to you and to council and that internal work group continues to see where we might find solutions within our code and our processes. So with that, we're here a year later. We still have the list, and we still have developers, local developers, that are really looking for just the assistance in incentivizing and moving the needle within our processes and codes for continued development as times are a bit tough with things that are completely out of our control, such as interest rates and the cost of building. So we have a few folks here today to speak, and I'll introduce them. And I think we have someone online as well. So with that, I will.
Before you introduce, I just want to reiterate what your role is as an advisory committee to council. And so the opportunity for you to make recommendations to council comes quarterly at the council community check-ins, or council committee check-ins. And that might be an opportunity if something jumps out at you today to bring something forward. It might be worth vetting whatever you think is really important with staff so that it can be brought forward in a way that's productive. And not advising council what to do, but making recommendations to council since they are our elected body. With that, go ahead and introduce our developers today.
Thank you, Rachel, of the extra legal piece of the roles. So I'll introduce Jerry Jones. He's a local developer and he'll have some things to share for you.
Jerry, thanks for joining us. We've got 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, and then another 5 to 7 minutes for questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, AHAC, for my time here today. So as Carrie said, my name is Jerry Jones. I'm with Mocker. We're a development firm based here in downtown Bend and do work throughout the Northwest. Although I'm not here to speak on a capital A affordable housing issue, but more so a middle housing issue that by nature of design and size makes it more affordable and attainable, as Rachel said, for homeowners, which I believe is all of our goals, right? I'm thankful for the public comment period or the developer comment period here to talk on this need for this code change regarding the middle housing land division, and specifically the need for building permits to be submitted at the time of application. I have over almost 20 years experience of land development throughout the Northwest and almost a decade specifically here in Bend. By way of that experience, I'm proud to say that I was part of the team that led the first middle housing land division here in Bend, and it was quite successful after getting through some trailblazing moments. However, since that date, I've not been able to move one forward, and so that's an issue, and it's mainly due to this requirement of the building permits. It's much like putting the cart in front of the horse per se, by needing to have those building permits before you actually even have a lot to build on. My development business is specializing recently in the development of finished lots so that the various talented and gifted home builders that are located here in Central Oregon have something to build on and be able to produce a home for sale that people could live in. Taking that bare ground into much needed housing. When taking on these projects, I don't know who that builder is going to be at that time, nor do I even know what's going to be built on those lots. I just focus on bringing those lots to market efficiently as possible for builders eager to provide the housing so they can get them in a fast way possible at the best value for them too that pencils. The need for permits at the time of application has stopped that work. The expense of having all the homes drawn up this early is cost prohibitive. And most builders that, if it was a builder that wanted to build, they can't afford that investment in the land, carrying all of the costs, the entitlements, and the SDCs so far in advance, and even without a lot to finance on. That is a big barrier. There's no mechanism to even get financing without a lot. So without that established lot, there's no mechanism for financing, and that cash need for all of the previously items I listed is just too great. Basically, by keeping the code as it is, this is a process that only allows larger developers and with deep pockets that access to the process. And it's shutting out individual property owners that want to do this and very qualified local developers and builders really begging for these lots. So like was said, I brought this up, the subject back during the workshops last year that was held at the municipal building. And at the time, it felt as if staff was aligned. There was a few of us developers that recognized this is a need, and it's a great barrier to unlocking these quality products of lots. At the time, there was a framing barrier as well. So I want to give appreciation that one got knocked down. Like we removed the framing barrier, but it was a good step and, frankly, just not enough. So I had understood that there were some internal working groups that were going on that were tackling this code change to remove it. But I've not heard anything since nor seen any change moving forward. So I'm really here just asking like, why the delay? If this is so needed and it's such a way to bring housing to market, why are we delaying? And the need is urgent. I'm just asking you guys to try and bring this up maybe with council and staff, so that way we can consider a code change much more sooner than later. Sure, questions for me?
Are you talking about the middle housing development where permits were needed prior if they were going to be subdividing the land?
Correct,
And that framing was needing to be done before the subdivided land was legally recorded?
correct.
And now that that barrier is gone, the barrier now is that permits need to be applied for without even having a legal plot of land.
Correct.
Description, recorded description.
Absolutely, yes.
I understand.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, guys.
This is an old rule, it's been around for a long time, or is it something new that
No, it was fairly recent, a few years ago.
they added that requirement?
Well, the middle housing land division was new, but this requirement has always been a part of that middle housing land division.
Question for Andy Gallo. Just clarify for me, you would like to see that permit submitted at what point in the process?
What I would like to see is just the need for a building permit removed. So that way then we could create a finished lot. We could market and sell those finished lots either to 1, 2, or 3 different builders. In this scenario, you have to sell, if I were going to take one lot and divide that into 4, I have to sell all of those to one builder. There is a lot of builders in town that want to build just on 1 lot or 2 lots, and they can't afford to buy all 4 of those. So if we could remove that building permit altogether, recognize that then it becomes a recorded lot. We finish the lots and we can sell those lots, and then whoever buys that lot can bring their plan forward, get that approved in the typical fashion of any subdivision.
Would you be opposed to a deed restriction mandating middle housing?
I wouldn't be opposed to that. I mean, I think that's the intent, right? The intent is middle housing, so we want to stay with that intent. This is just a big barrier for it.
Helen or any questions online? Okay.
Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
That
it.
was technical and fantastic. Carrie?
What's your name? Joe.
And then Nick Jones is also here then this afternoon.
Hi, guys. I'm Nick Jones. I'm one of the owners of Terra Development Group and also a real estate broker in town. I'm going to kind of wear my real estate broker hat a little bit for this in the sense that, but it is still applicable to the middle housing land division. I've had several clients kind of reach out to us when the middle housing land division rules were created that had interest in trying to make use of this new code. And as they dig into it and they come across the barriers of entry, which is like Matt had initially said, was you had to have the walls up, then you could get your plat. Then they reduced it down to you had to submit your building plans to be able to get your plat. If we're thinking in the scenario, not necessarily as a developer who's looking to acquire that land and then make all this work, but maybe putting on our hats of like this homeowner who has owned the land for 10, 15, 20 years. They have a half-acre lot. They have plenty of land to maybe be able to take advantage of this new code. For them to be able to do that and try and sell a portion of their property to make a little bit of money, they have to go far beyond the minimum requirements to create lots, and they have to also go ahead and put forward all those building permit costs. And just the reality is a lot of folks can't afford to carry those costs, those additional costs. And if the objective is to I'll have a program that people, citizens, developers, all want to be able to take advantage. Well, it's not a matter of want. Everybody does want to be able to take advantage of it, but they really can't take advantage of it. In practicality, it's too big of a financial roadblock for people to overcome. Thank you.
We probably have questions.
Sorry.
We want all of it, not just the upfront part. Questions? Maybe?
I have one.
Yeah.
Of course I do. I I see both sides of the coin with this one. And I'm wondering if instead of a potential right of the requirement to have permits, to delay the cost or payment of the permits until after the development is done, would that be a viable option?
I think that that would absolutely be viable. I mean, the reality is, you
Stop
know,
design.
right, you still have costs that you're gonna have to incur, but you're incurring all of them, it becomes too much of a burden to have to carry. So
Understood.
I think yes, I think there's room for a middle ground, whether you're deferring it, whether it's a deed restriction. It's the upfront cost that is the number one limiting factor.
I agree.
Yeah.
That's all right. Question for you from me, hearing none from them. What options are you aware of that would provide leverage so that someone could finance some of that upfront cost? Is there, before the last report, it seems to me like maybe there's just nothing at all.
There really isn't. I mean, the only option that I almost feel hesitant to even mention that I'm aware of would be private money lending, but that's not even a broad option for the general public. So it feels like not even a valid option. A valid option would be if you could go get a loan at it from a bank, from a mortgage broker, someone that specializes in maybe particularly land. But right now, why would you give me a loan to a deed that's something that doesn't exist?
That makes sense.
It's not possible.
So were we to bring this up with council, I want to make sure I understand the thrust of what you're saying is there's an undue burden for non-financeable money to make these things go, and it reduces the pool of folks who could be involved. Is that
correct? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way to put it. It really reduces the pool. And if the middle housing land division's goal is to increase the pool, then we have to understand that the practical rules that are in place are actually limiting it.
Thank you. Other questions? Yep. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
All right, Eric Cosmo is here to share as well.
Hi, my name is Eric Coslow. I'm the owner of Ben Design Group, and we specialize in building design, a variety of residential projects specializing in the historic district primarily. So we have many projects throughout the historic district, Old Bend District, working on a house on Congress Avenue right now. We also have expertise in permitting. So I've specialized in more complicated permitting applications, multiple applications. I've assisted many other design professionals, engineers, architects throughout the years since 2008 in Central Oregon, and have pretty vast knowledge about the permit process and design feasibility for projects. So I perform a lot of feasibility studies for projects. The reason why I'm here today is to do with a particular project which kind of resurfaces many barriers that I've seen over the years, but this one is kind of taking the cake on how prohibitive it is to develop a infill property. Essentially, it's address 334 Northwest Chamberlain Street. That is on the intersection of Hunter Place, and that's just around the corner downtown here, close proximity to Market of Choice and City Hall. And Chamberlain Street is kind of the connecting avenue between the primary amenities of the area. Hunter Place is a street that comprises 2 blocks in total, and that street has a special setback on it. So currently it's a 40-foot right of way and it has a 60-foot right of way. And so this, the barriers that I'm presenting today are to do with this special setback. And then also the sidewalks that are required for development. This property is a very unique property because it has an extensive amount of natural rock features on it. It has a large rock outcropping that extends up to 10 feet above the street level with a vertical base along Hunter Place. And on Chamberlain Street, as viewed from the road, it has more of a gentle slope up to the top of that hill, but that entire portion of the property is solid rock with a layer of lava rock on top and then basalt rock as exposed on Hunter Place Avenue. That that rock existing on the property presents a lot of additional cost for any kind of development. And that has been prohibitive for prior owners of this property. So I'm currently working with the new owners who purchased the property just approximately a year and a half ago. And prior to that, I had worked on some feasibility studies for this property and for a duplex, which I guess would be considered a triplex construction. So there'd be 3 single-family dwellings in total on that property. What we're presenting now is that same concept, except with a middle housing land development. And so we're excited to go that route with the middle housing land development because it's rather new. It presents some exciting opportunities as far as being able to sell off more than one part of that property. So originally we approached this project in terms of a lot partition to divide into 2 lots. The historic nature of the property is problematic for some development, some future development. It's just unknown since it's a subjective review process with the Landmarks Commission. And so the middle housing land development presents us much more opportunity for kind of a sure return on investment. And so this property, given the extensive rock features and then the absence of utilities in Chamberlain Street, the water sewer exists in Hunter Place. So a lot partition was prohibitive due to the need to bring in new infrastructure from Chamberlain Street. So we would have to trench all the way down Chamberlain, and that was not feasible. And so the middle housing land development allows us to bring those in from Hunter Place. We can divide the property essentially into 3 lots, which is what we're proposing with a triplex development. The historic aspect of this, again, is very important. And we always have kind of barriers along the lines of development with historic properties. And I understand that very well and am able to work within the historic code to achieve, the maximum or the optimal outcome for most clients. And, that is largely ADUs and additions, sometimes demolition and reconstruction or new construction on an infill lot. This property is large enough to where it supports a legal lot partition. And so that's the reason why this seems so pertinent to present to you, because this property is oversized from what supports just a single family dwelling. It's right downtown. It's a prime location to present new housing, but it has to pencil financially, and this special setback limits this property immensely as far as what can be built there. It would result in a very narrow area of footprint that would provide only single well, it'd be a single family dwelling, each of them, but they'd be like an ADU. It'd be just like a single bedroom essentially. And to put all the money into this property with the MHLD, the infrastructure, the excavation that's just required for the buildings, it just doesn't pencil to build out to structures that are only 1-bedroom units. And so we really need at least 2-bedroom units with each one. And so what I have presented in a pre-app meeting, which Carrie Bell was part of, and kind of advised me that this is a possibility to speak before you today. We've presented 2 small craftsman style cottages that overlap that special setback, but meet the normal 10-foot setback. This property is elevated above the street, and over 63% of the properties on the block, which this one is on, of the 2 blocks of Hunter Place, already encroach into this special setback. We had a lot of negative feedback in the pre-app meeting concerning getting a waiver to this special setback. So what we ultimately want is a waiver to the special setback and a waiver to the sidewalk construction. The sidewalk construction is more to do with cost. So the cost that we received an estimate from the excavator involved with the project, and he also does the concrete, was at the time $52,000. That I think has gone up a little bit just as time has gone on, but primarily that would be increased given the outcome of that pre-app meeting. There was we were notified that basically that sidewalk would now need to be 6 foot wide instead of 5 foot wide. And so there'd be a much more extensive effort of excavation to achieve that. And then also there'd be some geotech involvement and slope stabilization. And essentially it benches this grade all the way back to what would be the footprint of the new structures. And yet we need to provide a staircase on grade per code. We can't have a building feature in the setback. So we have to provide a staircase on grade that comes up to that near 10-foot level. So it's a very challenging project, and the elimination of this special setback is really what we're after. And then we can provide these 2 brand new single-family dwelling units, 2 triplex units, if you will. The 3rd unit is an existing historic home on the site. And we
might just need to wrap up so that
Okay.
the committee can ask you questions.
Yeah, so that's essentially the gist of it. I can, outline some more information after this meeting if I have the opportunity.
Thank you. I appreciate the level of detail. You've obviously put a lot of work into the site and trying to make housing happen on that piece of property. I know as a committee, we appreciate that. Any questions? I'll look to my right first. No. Folks on the left. Helen or Joanna, any questions? So I do have I do have one question. Is this the first site that you have worked on that you believe these kinds of waivers would be needed for? Have you analyzed other sites that had a similar level of difficulty and just not proceeded with them to this point?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've looked at numerous sites, particularly within the historic district, that have special setbacks. There is a project actually down the road that was granted this waiver to special setback on Hunter Place.
Yeah.
And so this one, just for some reason, they don't want to.
Yeah. So
grant it.
and if this is a matter of conjecture, I'll ask you for it. Just an absolute guess. How many lots do you think, given your familiarity with the historic district, how many lots do you think this sort of waiver might apply to get more middle market housing in the historic district?
Well, the special setback is only applicable to roads that, have less than that 60-foot right of way. So I'm not entirely sure how many of those roads there are in this downtown area in the historic district, but I would assume there's quite a few. And so I think that it would have a pretty large impact on particularly that area. And it's that area in particular that I'm focused on with this special setback, because there's already so many restrictions with the historic aspect and
Thank you.
what you can build. Yeah.
Appreciate that. Other questions? No. Thank you very much for your time and
Okay.
the level of engagement. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And we have Perry Brooks in the audience as well as David Mosey online. Yeah, we can bring him on.
Great. Well, I'm not here to talk about middle housing because I'm involved in one in the middle housing land division in a historic district. So that's a challenge in and of itself. But thank you for your time. My name is Perry Brooks. I'm a partner in Roost Development. Roost Development is a developer and we focus on infill development within the city of Bend. And between myself and my partner, we have cumulatively about 35 years of living in Bend. And in that time, we've had the firsthand experience of seeing how housing has been detrimentally affecting our community. We all know there's a lack of housing in Oregon, but we can acutely feel it here in Bend, given the rise in housing costs and popularity of people moving in. And ourselves, along with our development partner, Astral Development, and David Mosey is on the line with us. We have identified 7 ways in which the city can participate in making it easier to provide housing, middle housing, and alleviate some of the financial burdens that developers of middle housing are seeing. You have a handout with that, I hope. And I'm wondering if this might be an opportunity if you would like to go through it individually, and David will help more than I on that end, or there are specific questions in which you had, if you had a chance to review it in the last 2 hours. So either way, we can go through it all and real quick in my allotted 5 minutes, or if there's any specific questions you guys have. Come on. You have to go to lunch or something? Yes. So if you want to do that, between David and I think we can tackle this and kind of run through this real quickly of what we're thinking, what we're proposing. Great. David, you want to tackle this? You want me to go for it?
I just wanted to set the program here briefly. What we're attempting to do is a rather novel approach. We're looking to build middle income housing through the use of tax exempt bond financing. As far as I know, in Oregon, it's a novel approach, though it's been done all over the country, and we can certainly share materials that show these successes. But from a high level, we would be acting as turnkey developers, not owners. A nonprofit would be the owner. And in every case, they're mission driven. They're not seeking to gain returns. They don't have to pay back any equity partners. There are no investors. The intention here is to have most of the capital stack funded by tax exempt bonds that are issued by a nonprofit. So with that setting kind of the stage, Perry, up to you. I can go through this in 3 minutes and then we can open up for questions if you like.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So
more long-winded than that, so probably best.
Okay, so quickly then, there are a few levers that can be pulled that will enable this to happen not just once. What we're looking to do is create a template that will create opportunity to develop middle income housing over and over and over again. Already we've seen several opportunities. Of course, we're focused on one right now, on only. The first is, of course, the tax abatement, for which already there's a mechanism in place. We'll be applying for it, of course. Now, if that 10-year tax abatement for middle income housing can be re-upped to meet the term of the bond, 20 years, 30 years. So if we could reapply, it would obviously really help the viability of the bond, which, of course, the bond, again, is paying for the construction of 120 units. From a high level, the more city involvement, the more viable the bond, right? The bond rating goes up, the debt service coverage ratio goes down, the interest goes down, because if you have a partner like the city of Bend, potential bond purchasers are going to be more likely to invest. So with that in mind, I'm going to keep going. The city as property owner, again, also checks those boxes. Now, again, a nonprofit entity will be owning the building. But if the city has interest in owning the land, and again, this is not a typical market rate or even affordable housing deal, where the cash flow is, it basically becomes available as an incentive to the city. So from where we're sitting, the city has many opportunities to fill its coffers here, especially perhaps for a housing trust fund. Year after year, as cash flow is generated through this middle income housing project, again, perhaps 120 units, the bond purchasers can basically, that income can be recycled year after year, leaving cash flow in year 2026, 2027, 2028, so on and so forth, available for the city if it would be amenable to coming in as a credit enhancer, as a property owner, or both. I'm going to skip SDCs for a second and come back to it because I'm talking about city engagement and perhaps intertwining the city with the actual ownership of the land. I just mentioned credit enhancement. If the city could come in as a credit enhancer on the project's interest reserve, I'm reading verbatim here, it would create an environment that will allow middle income projects to be much more viable. So basically, we're talking about AMIs at 100, 110, 120%. We expect that we're going to get thousands of applications for 100 units. So it's extremely unlikely that the interest reserve is not going to be met. But that would be the only thing that the city would be, in this scenario, that the city would be on the hook for, is to basically be a backstop for that interest reserve. And after this, we can send, a set of numbers or something that illustrates this, because I realize that it's a little bit, kind of in the weeds here. I already mentioned the city owning the land for workforce projects. After the term of the bond, 20 years, 30 years, there's a 120 unit building sitting there, and the nonprofit has no interest in owning it. The bond purchasers have already been paid off. So the carrot on the end of the stick, I already mentioned the cash flow that the city could generate for itself. The city could also take ownership of this building and give it to Housing Works or sell it in year 30, whatever it likes to do. So again, I want to reinforce that there's a huge boon here financially. There's a big windfall that's created through this opportunity. And now I'm going to go back to SDCs. One hopefully creative idea, and then I'll shut up. One hopefully creative idea that you will consider is if we're restricting AMIs to 100, 150, and 120% of AMI, the suggestion is that perhaps you could juxtapose market rate AMIs with the AMI that we'll be setting units to, and reduced the SDCs by that margin. So if market rate is 140% of AMI, but we're building units at 100% of AMI, that delta, 28.6%, perhaps for every $100 of SDC charges, the project could pay $71.40 as a way to not only create revenue for the city, again, but to enable us to build as many of these middle income projects, units as possible. I feel like I don't have time to go over the last few points, but they're there on the sheet. Quicker permitting, commercial use, tax exemption for commercial space, and extending the core boundary is, of course, already.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So questions, and I do want to preface the questions by saying this is a very interesting proposal that's exceptionally detailed, and yeah, I'm really excited to have it in front of us for an almost double-digit number of minutes now.
I guess I have one question.
Yeah.
So is the intent for the developer to build the housing and then make the developer fee and then leave, or are you owning and operating for the 20 or 30 year period of time?
I guess it all depends circumstantially. In our case, that the bond owner, that we would be a fee developer at this point, and the bond issuer would be the owner of the property at that point for the 20 or 30-year period.
Gotcha. Thank you.
There are other circumstances, of
Sure,
course, but that's
sure,
in
yeah.
particular ours.
Other questions? Oh,
Yeah, raise hand out there.
There's George Ramirez has a question.
and we don't have an opportunity at this point for audience questions, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But we can come back to that at another time. And I apologize, I did not have a chance to review it before the meeting, so I don't have useful questions. But thank you very much for bringing it, and as
course.
the committee has more time to dive into it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we're always excited to hear about a new way of getting housing going.
Great. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That is the extent of the known developers that had let us know that they were wanting to speak, but if there's anybody in the audience that we didn't know about that's not on the agenda,
I think that might be this George Ramirez.
that's why I'm bringing that up, because that might
Okay.
be something.
Can I ask him?
Yeah, go ahead.
Moving this person over to panelist.
All right, George,
You
or
can hear us, accept that
Okay.
invitation.
all right, you should be able to speak and share any thoughts you have, if they're within this developer feedback part of our agenda. Okay. Great, go ahead. We're not able to hear your audio if you are speaking. Do you have any comments for us relating to developer feedback? Right. We still can't hear you, and we're running a little bit late, so I'll move on to the next item of the agenda. And staff, if you can try to get in touch and figure out how we can get him some airtime. So let's Ian, Assistant City Attorney. A fantastic name, if I say so myself.
Stand at the podium. Thank you, Ian. I'm the other Ian Lighthizer, I'm a lawyer in the city attorney's office, and I don't have a presentation prepared, but I'm here, I think, maybe to talk for just a few minutes about the fact that staff have been working on some potential revisions to the section of our municipal code that outlines really the scope and role of this committee. I'm not going to share draft code language to you today or with you today for a couple of reasons. One, it's still draft, staff are still talking about it. Two, we don't yet have a firm council date for when council is going to be considering this. As you know, council as the city's legislative body is in control of our municipal code. So the way the process works is staff would present the code to council as a proposed ordinance. Council will consider it and amend it, adopt it, say, no, go back to the drawing board. That might happen at the meeting in July, or it might happen later. We're trying to sync up a few things, but ultimately, I think what we are trying to do, and McConnell can correct me if she has a different take, but I think what we are trying to do is sort of true up what is, I won't say it's antiquated, true up the code section that outlines what this committee does with what you are actually doing, which has evolved into, I think, having some influence and input on, I think, a broader range of the programmatic elements of what the city does in housing. There are some limits to that, but I think this committee has become involved in sort of more points along the spectrum or continuum of housing, not necessarily all points. There are some limits. This committee doesn't really do land use. It isn't, I would say, directly involved or as directly involved in some of the development aspects of housing as, for example, certainly not the planning commission or even our community and economic development department. But I think that the scope of this group has expanded over time. So what we're doing is working on some code changes to try to more adequately reflect that. I don't see those potential changes that will eventually go to council as really changing the role of this, but I think it's just more accurately reflecting what this group has done. So that's very high level. If you have any questions about that process or what that might look like, now we can certainly talk about it. Again, I don't have draft code that I'm ready to share with you because it's underway, but if you have thoughts about, especially those of you who have seen AHAC work and maybe evolve over time, if you have thoughts, and if you've looked at the code, if you have thoughts about either the role or how the actual work could be better reflected in the municipal code, it's a great opportunity either at this meeting or as you reflect on it afterwards in the coming weeks to talk to either myself or Lynn McConnell about it, if we can consider and perhaps even incorporate that input. So a little bit of a preview, and maybe an invitation to think about this, and eventually the draft code will be posted to the council agenda before the meeting. I'm not sure there will be an opportunity for AHAC to actually consider this, and really it's a council decision. But I think it's important that you know that this is being worked up and worked over a bit.
Thank you. For the application of the committee, I will say this is probably the one thing that I harass over the last 3 years, I've harassed Lynn McConnell about probably the most. Is because there has been such an evolution of the work of this committee from what was originally conscienced. When I started getting involved in 2016, it was a very narrow sliver, and really my questions, harassment, to be fair, for Lynn, was that as council consistently invited this group to have more input on more topics at their discretion, things such as cottages, plexes, micro units, RS zoning. There's been a whole ton of things they've asked us to talk about that don't fall under the very narrow range of what you find in the code. And so that's a lot of the history behind this, is that this group has evolved substantially over the last 12 years, longer than I've been involved. And the code doesn't, in a particularly accurate way, reflect the work of this body today. And so that is something I really appreciate staff working on. I would ask any of you who haven't read that section of the code and you really need to get some sleep, read that section of the code, and then please do provide your thoughts to staff for their incorporation. The timing does make it a little bit challenging. This probably won't come back in front of us. It is, as Ian said, a truing up to our mission where we're at today, but I would very much like to invite anyone in this group to provide suggestions to that.
Yeah.
Or staff.
Yeah, and I'll just to sort of make sure the door is sufficiently open on that. We, the lawyers, will sometimes talk to advisory groups about how you can and can't do business because of public meetings law. You are always welcome to email staff, including the lawyers, including Lynn, if you have thoughts on this. So please, if you're so inclined, take a look at the section in the code about AHAC. And if you have thoughts, let us know. I mean, we're working on it. I do want to be, I think, conscientious in letting you know that at least as I'm approaching this, I'm not looking this as really an opportunity to expand the role or scope of AHAC. AHAC certainly not authority, that's a council decision. But we do want our code to reflect reality, and I think the evolution of what this group has done, it's happened, and so the code needs to keep up.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate it. Any questions? No? Really appreciate your time. Yep. And Jackie, we're getting back on track. Appreciate your patience with us.
Oh, we've got to read things. No,
Nope, we don't.
We aren't taking audience comments, questions this time.
I just started. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh, you're gonna drive? Yep, great. Hi, everyone.
The long awaited and we've been looking forward to this for a while, so we're really excited to hear your thoughts and your thoughts on how development could be changed or improved by some modifications.
Before you get started, Jackie, I just want to make sure you're all aware, we're not making any decisions today.
Thank
We're gonna listen to Jackie's presentation, ask questions, and get as much information from her about her experience as we can. And then we will come back to you as a staff in July, hopefully make a decision in August, September if necessary, if more discussion is necessary.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Rachel.
Everyone, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jackie Keough. I'm the executive director of Rooted Homes. I've been in affordable housing for over 15 years and worked intimately with CDBG for all those years. So what I'm presenting to you today is a quick overview of who we are for those who don't know us, and also just recommendations across based on state policy of how the community development block grant program could potentially be more helpful to serving residents in the city of Bend. This is my monologue, so if you have questions in between, feel free to interrupt and ask me, all right? So Rooted Homes has 17 homes completed in Bend, 40 under construction, and through those homes we'll serve 170 people by next year. So these are generally who we're serving. Typically folks between 60 and 80% area median income, but we also can go as low as 30% AMI, thanks to our partnership with Housing Works, as well as up to 120% when we put only private funding in those homes. We sell our homes for a median home price of $250,000. Almost a quarter of those homeowners are over the age of 57 years. More than half are women-led households, and a third are BIPOC households. So we're really focusing on seniors, women, BIPOC households, most of those groups of people who've been locked out of typical home ownership. So we operate Central Oregon's Community Land Trust. And what that simply is a policy tool to create permanent affordability so that every time we build a home, we deed restrict that home and we ensure that when it resells, it must resell to another income qualified homeowner, essentially creating more City of Bend affordable homes at less cost year over year. Our specific policy, because we do believe in generational wealth building, is that homeowners earn 1.5% equity on what they've brought in their down payment, which honestly is usually zero, and what they've brought in their mortgage. So on average, after 10 years of living in a rooted home, our homeowners earn $75,000 in equity. We, as the land trust, we manage the land lease as the leaseor, and we also manage all the oversight of that public funding that's in the land, including CDBG. So we are doing the administration of CDBG and other public fund compliance. And at the same time, the City of Bend also administers and reviews us annually. So potentially a little duplicative work being done there. Next slide, please. So this is a very basic review of how we fund our affordable home ownership. As you can see, just under half is our construction loan, which we take from local banks and we pay back. We receive city funding, which is 16% of our funding sources. And then the state provides 17% of forgivable loans. And the county and private funders provide just over 25% of grants. So more than half of our construction costs, right, from land acquisition all the way to home sales are loans. What that means is because unlike rental, we cannot turn that into long-term debt. We have to pay back those loans immediately. And when we do that, the only way to pay back those loans is by using the homeowner's mortgages or the home sales. So very simply put, our home sales, which we see as revenue, has to equal the loan payoffs. Otherwise, we don't have enough money. So if we were a market, a market real estate developer, we would simply raise prices to pay off more loans. We don't want to do that, which is why we're very thoughtful about how much loans we take on compared to grants. Okay, the next slide. So I luckily am the Housing Oregon Policy Chair for the Rural Policy Committee. And I also have the privilege of working on the Urban Policy Chair with my time in Portland. And so last year, which we presented this to you last year, we asked Housing Oregon, which is the membership agency of all affordable housing developers, to look at the CDBG policies across the state, and who is using them as grants and who is using them as loans as a comparable. So, housing staff replied to us, and so what we see is the majority of CDBG programs are being used as grants. Some have a grant and loan program, and those are new programs for both those entities. And only Bend and Eugene have solely a loan program currently. I mean, community development block grant is called grant, for a reason. So historically, there's that history. Most of these entities, including you yourself, use it as down payment assistance, as well as land acquisition. When we did our survey, most folks prioritize it for down payment assistance. In the city of Bend, you all know this, but DPA, at least for rooted homes, averages about $50,000 per home buyer. And so it's really the difference between what someone can afford to buy a rooted homes and not being able to apply to a rooted home. So if we look at the down payment assistance specifically, what would do? Let me back up. Rooted homes use City of Bend's DPA funding until I came on and we saw that there was interest essentially being charged to our lowest income residents, and that because they're seen as loans, our homeowners can't earn equity on them, and that does not help our generational wealth building. So we have turned to using DPA only from entities like Oregon Housing Community Services and Business Oregon, who solely give DPA as grants, because we want our homeowners not to have that interest and equity, interest payment after the term, nor do we want them to have negative equity earned on a loan when they could have a grant. So we're just putting the clients first there. Okay, so this is a big slide. So essentially, Central Oregon has no grant funding for land acquisition at all. The state has a loan program. You all have a loan program. And I would reason that's why we see, especially what we talked about earlier than me, that's why we see a lot of smaller developers not able to build affordable or middle income housing, right? Because the land is so expensive. And once you buy the land as a land trust or a home ownership entity, you've locked that capital. Like I can't sell that land out from under them without negating my ground lease, which is the whole point of affordable housing. And so this is kind of, I'm going to walk you through what it would look like on resale with different types of city policy changes or status quo maintained. So the first bar is the original home sales price. So we price our homes to 65% area median income because we want some wiggle room of clients we can serve between 65 and our general cap of 80% area median income. So we sold that home for $240,000. Over 10 years, based on historical AMI growth in Deschutes County, interest rates, construction costs, land costs, how that impacts our resale formula. And our resale formula essentially says how much we are allowed to sell the home for. We will see if we were just going to follow our resale formula, we could sell this home at $278,000 10 years later. But because AMI has significantly grown, what's affordable is actually that house goes from 65% AMI to 47% AMI. What that means is we're able to serve lower income clients with a resale. We love this. The CLT model is supposed to work like this. In my time at other CLTs, this was a great opportunity for folks who couldn't get into our homes to start with. They could buy a resale. And so we're expanding and serving the broader range of the continuum of affordable housing. Recognizing that we have CDBG in our properties, and currently we would need to pay, not speaking of this DPA that our homeowners would have to pay back, but we would have to pay you all back when that term ended for that land that we used to borrow as a loan. We would want to increase that cap so we could take money out of the home and pay you back. So at a home at 80% AMI, I would increase that to the highest amount that someone could afford at 80% AMI, like using my cap. That's over $500,000 home. So in 10 years, I will sell this house at over $500,000 So I'm losing a significant affordability and we're locking a lot of residents out for the sake of paying the city back. Now, we also have higher income homes at 120% AMI, which to be fair, don't have CDBG in them, but they're in the same community. And if we were going to try and pay the city back, would be our strategy. We would sell these to the highest cap we could. So we'd be selling these homes after 10 years at $820,000, which we don't like because it goes against our mission and the city of Bend's mission of affordable housing being preserved and being more affordable over time. Next slide, please. Okay, no, that's good.
Okay.
And so in terms of financial impact, right? And so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So CDBG requires a specific type of audit. And so this is also another reason you may see other entities not applying to CDBG, because it requires an audit that on average costs $25,000 a year. And because the city of Bend has structured this as a loan, it stays on my books year after year. What this does, unfortunately, is every audit I have to run with that $25,000 fee. Now, for huge entities, even with Rooted Homes, it's not that significant, but if you think about the 20-year payment plan, I'm actually sometimes paying more in audit funds than I received in CDBG. So it essentially renders those funds useless if I don't pay them back. This is the only loan that we have on our books that does this. All other public money that we use is termed as a forgivable loan. And because it's termed as a forgivable loan with a repayment plan based on affordability extension, our auditors do not require us to do that. And so I honestly, we were talking, Lynn and I were talking to HUD, and we brought this up a couple of weeks ago, like this can be slightly problematic for smaller entities. It also limits our leveraging, right? So Rooted Homes is severely over leveraged because of the debt that's on our books. And so when we go out to get a low interest loan or a private loan or even a construction loan, they see all this debt from the CDBG on our books and they're going to lend us less. So our ability to use your funds as matching actually goes down based on how much CDBG we take on as an entity, which is why last year we made the strategic decision to stop taking CDBG. Next slide. So I recognize this is informational and I hope it has been helpful. If it was me, and it's not, I recognize that. What I would recommend doing would be the CDBG, as we saw in that slide, is only 16% of the full funding. If you were all to consider aligning it with other funding, public funding, so that your terms are the same, more folks would be able to use it. It would be easier to administer, both for the city side and for the recipient of the funds. And from an auditing perspective and accounting side, the term would be the same. So for CDBG land acquisition, you could consider matching the state's LIFT program. They have a 20-year loan. And at that 20-year mark, you can show extended affordability through a deed restriction and extend that for another 20 years. And at that time, they would forgive the loan. What we love about that is because we have a 99-year land lease on our homes, we actually, from an accounting perspective, we see that our accountant sees that loan immediately forgiven when that 99-year land lease is recorded, which means it doesn't sit on our books. It actually is an asset on our books, which helps us build more affordable housing. And then for CDBG down payment assistance, you could also match the state, which structures it as a 5-year forgivable loan. There's other entities across the state, both counties and cities, that have different year terms. I believe City of Portland is like 10 to 15 years on that forgivability. But the forgivable loan piece is just really more powerful than a straight loan. So thank you. That's the end of my slides. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Really appreciate you providing all that in one package, because it really is a long-term question, I think. Folks on the committee, will start online. Joanna Gardner or Helen. Any questions?
Not from me. That was great. Thank you.
All right. Look over to the left. Matt.
I don't have a question, moreover, as a statement on my way out the door. All of the other DPAs that we use in home lending are forgivable after 5 to 15 years. Thank you.
That seems like a fairly significant comment. Can you elaborate any?
Yeah, in all of the home loan scenarios where we have DPA that I'm a part of, outside of City of Bend / CDBG, at the time of recording, those are forgivable loans after 5 years, all the way up to 15 years. Which means that if the person stays in the home, this is strictly for DPA. If the person stays in the home for, let's just use Home Start as an example, Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines, Iowa, up to $15,000 of down payment assistance towards closing costs or down payment. If they are awarded the $15,000 and they stay in their home for 5 years, it is forgiven, and then becomes an asset of the borrower. And they can earn equity on that, and they don't have to pay it back.
All right.
And just to clarify on that, Matt, then typically in these situations, and Jackie too, there is some sort of shared appreciation that you talked about where the nonprofit involved gets some of that value increase, and the homeowner is sort of limited so that when that forgivability happens, it's not like instant. They get all of that equity, right? They only would get a portion of it based on the shared appreciation.
Our policy would give them the full equity of any outside loan. So that loan is tied to that homeowner and they would get full equity on that. And just to clarify, so Rooted Homes doesn't keep any of the money. We just keep the money in the land we're able to make it low, more affordable to a lower income person. The more money we pull out of the land, as you saw in that slide before, the higher income we have to set the bar for.
Down payment assistance is an asset of the buyer. And is looked as such. Deferred paybacks are, depending on the underwriting team, you can write around it, but even from privately, Umpqua Bank has a down payment assistance program, and it's forgiven after 15 years, and that's using the bank's private money for down payment assistance.
Another thing to add to that is that our resale policy ensures that someone would never be underwater on their home, so they could always sell. But if with that non-forgivable loan, people are underwater right now, and even if they needed to sell, they couldn't because they couldn't pay back the loan.
Other questions?
I have a question, and maybe Rachel or Lynn can chime in on this, but I mean, my understanding of some of the CDBG funds that we get have restrictions as to what we can do with them. And I think that that's part of the reason we've awarded things in the way that we have. I mean, because this is a great presentation and I love the ideas. I just feel like maybe our hands are tied to some degree, and that doesn't mean we can't be creative, but I'm trying to address what we're getting at. And we have obviously a coffer when these are loans, we get money back so that it can be distributed to other projects as well. So we're making a choice to provide a loan, as I understand it, because then the money will come back to the committee to award other projects loans as well.
And so we're going to continue this conversation in July. If you have more questions for staff, if you could make sure that you send them to me so that we can answer them for you. And then we'll present some information too. We're going to look at loans the city has given out and how those have been paid back and under what terms. We're also going to look at other jurisdictions and what their policies are and their practices are so that you can make an informed decision at following AHAC meetings.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel.
I assume we'll get this presentation sent to us.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your
I
time.
appreciate your time. Right, and Rachel, you're next on the agenda for property tax incentives.
I'm just going to tee this up for my friend Jonathan here. If you were all able to watch our council presentation. And Jonathan has given some follow-up council subcommittee presentations. We're exploring property tax incentives that will help create housing in general, not just capital A affordable housing, but affordable housing and attainable housing. We clearly have housing scarcity in our community, and we want to make sure that we are addressing it with as much information and kind of as targeted as possible. And so Jonathan's going to talk to you a little bit about the Bend Urban Renewal Housing Tax Credit Policy and the process in bringing that forward to council over the next few months. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just real quick, the Bend Urban Renewal Agency is a different organization than the city of Bend. They are the same elected body, so they're the same decision maker, but we operate under a different capacity than what the city of Bend is doing. So the reason I'm here today, in addition to Rachel and Allison, is we were directed by, well, it's confusing, but Borough requested to council, which is the same body, to assign policy formation to a council subcommittee. And the subcommittee asked for feedback from our Bend Economic Development Agency because there's an employment aspect of this, but then also the housing aspect, and hence why we're here at AHAC today. As Rachel was noting, we're here targeting the affordable with the capital A being able, because this is a flexible tool that could target affordable housing or it could target market rate housing. So you'll have 3 opportunities to potentially weigh in on this policy formation. We're not necessarily asking for direction today, just kind of give you an idea, overview of the tool, kind of the programming and the overall objectives. In July, we'll come back with a more direct feedback and recommendation. And if you can't make a recommendation in July, we could come back in August, but you may also not elect to make a recommendation. That's up to this board. So in January, we paused the multi-unit tax exemption policy. And one of the reasons is it was negatively impacting our core area tax increment finance area. So not in terms of it's taken money away, it just delayed that increment until the 10-year mark, but we were going to get 800 units. So it was a policy trade-off. However, there was some complexities that resulted with outside influences that kind of complicated the process. 2 applications went through in one way and 2 applications went through in another. So council was like, we need to have more consistency and stability to our housing developers and developers in general. And then they also asked us to conduct a incentive and site-specific assessment. So how are we being effective in meeting the market demands, both 50 to 120%, but then also, are we being as effective as possible? So this, in a few minutes, we'll get into really some kind of high-level data. But our goal is to adopt this policy on August 21st. It's a simple policy, 1-page, 2-pager. And then between August 21st and January, we're going to try to do the administrative process and formation. So I'm assuming, Rachel, we could bring that back in the end, kind of get your ideas of how to administratively deploy this. But some of the feedback that we got when we did the incentives is we really needed to reduce outside volatility. Council wanted the city to be the primary driver in addition to the partner with the developer. As you were noting, Allison, we want to generate returns on the community. So if we make money in the end, we could do more and more of these projects overall. And then also there were some issues with market rate incentives. We had some unanticipated impacts to TIF. Because it's state allowed in 10-year, it's non-flexible. We could not adjust to the market as need be. Certain areas of the community were being overly impacted by development. That's something we heard from our community members, as in our residents and visitors. And then also just to reduce the programming requirements, the goal of certain members of council is to make this easily accessible, not only to the quadplex developer, but the high-end multi-unit developer. We have to continue to reduce and eliminate blighted properties, because one of the key aspects of any kind of tax increment policy, whether that's a tax incentive or an exemption, is you want to continually increase returns in the community, because we still have to provide service for fire, water, etc. And then also just to reduce the administrative burdens for staff and developers, and to also make this program more equitable to smaller developers. We heard from a couple of community members. I worked with Carrie. We tried to replicate this all the way down to the ADU size. We'll get into that in a second, but we figured with our data that we could only go as low as the quadplex development. So we did 4 steps in the assessment. We discussed with housing, Ali and I discussed some pro formas with housing developers. We reviewed the incentives, and then we also analyzed the community impact and benefits. So we ran some numbers and, trying to stay high level, we focused on a quadplex development and a medium to large development. And by using tax increment financing, that's the tool that we would use in this process. We would convert an existing parking lot, and these are 2 developments that have been identified in the future. That's not currently happening at the moment. On the left side, we could actually attain 1 affordable unit at 60% AMI. We would incentivize and structure the term and the development agreement to meet that goal. And then on the other side, we can actually achieve 13 affordable units between 80 and 100% AMI. And the way that those terms are structured is just based on how much property tax generation occurs every year. And then we can, like MUPTI, we package it all together and show them like, what do you need to achieve market affordability for 1 unit at 60% AMI? They run the numbers through their pro forma, their mortgage rates, however they see their financial packages, and we come in and offer the incentive. Real quick, just some market rate overview, because we're targeting multifamily rent through this project right now. Unlike we will eventually potentially get into home ownership in the future, but for today, just multifamily. So 47% of our multifamily unit stock is 2 bedrooms. 3 bedrooms is 11%. We have a total of 7,600 multifamily units in Bend. The current market rate rent is $1,700. And our current vacancy rate is 5.8%. Percent of those market units that can actually target 80% AMI or below is 22%. And then of all units, 14% are dedicated to affordability, i.e. rent restricted, rent controlled, etc. With our occupational wage versus market rate rent, 72% of our MSA, our metro between Bend and Redmond occupational wage would be cost burden per wage versus the market rate rent. On the right side, you'll see our lowest paid occupations, which are food service workers, recreation workers, childcare workers, and automotive service attendants. And that almost accounts for 10% of our total workforce. And then our highest paid occupations are the managerial levels, the pharmacist and the IT managers. And using the metro data for occupational wages and our current market rate affordability, this is where our gaps are occurring. So the market is actually meeting, in the white, that's where the market is actually meeting the need. So anything in the red to the dark red, that's where the market's not meeting the need. So anything truly below 90% to 30%, the market's not needing. So when you hear talk about middle income of 100 to 120, the market is actually meeting that need right now. That's fluctuating. That can change at any moment based on any number of factors. But what we're seeing right now is the market's not meeting these AMI percentage numbers or below per these households. Given the population projections, you'll see the 1 to 2 person households are dramatically increasing in the city of Bend. 3 person and 4 person plus households are pretty much stable. And so that also will determine the need in the future of what we are offering in terms of the incentive. So basically, using the growth rate that the American Community Survey provides and the PSU projections, you'll see the anticipated growth rate with the total market unit need for multifamily housing in the second column. So we'll have about 157 studios that will be needed by 2030. 350 of 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 455, and then 120 for 3 bedroom. So what is this policy exactly? It's an annual tax credit for eligible projects on new development. If you're familiar with how property tax is generated, there's a change per ratio that the county applies, and there's a certain value, and it gets technical, but our 2 main policy objectives are housing affordability and employment development. And so why are we proposing to use this tool? It enables borough on the behalf of the city to meet community needs and council goals with low barriers. We'll use data to drive the market response to community conditions and need. We can target development per Oregon Statute 457. And in addition, it can be the same policy all over the city. It'll be applicable. It won't be limited just to one area. It works well in 3 types of scenarios. A new development with little or no existing improvements, a massive redevelopment on an existing site, or significant and tenant improvements, i.e. upscale. You take, for example, there's a current development that's happening across from Market of Choice. It was a single family detached, and now it's going to be multifamily unit. That's the type of tenant improvement, significant development that we're talking about here. It does not work for refurbishments or basic tenant improvements. So if there's an existing multifamily unit complex that is trying to meet ADA requirements, et cetera, it won't work well for that because there's not substantial generation in tax increment. This program is being utilized currently in Salem, Oregon. There's an example here. It's called the Jory Tip District. It was established in 2020. It's 12 acres and has up to 200 units. The total term that they're offering the tax credit for is 41 years, up to $21 million rebate. And the only requirement that they had was 15% of units affordable at the 80% AMI or below. So today we're going to talk about, I know we're kind of blowing through and everyone's always told me to keep it high level. So on the left side is the basic requirements that we will require. This is pretty much non-negotiable. This meets the basic tenets of the state statute, compliant with current policies, and also financial viability impact. I want to make clear that this tool is not to help cost gaps at the moment. This is to help market rate developments that are going to occur to provide more affordable units in lieu of the tax abatement, i.e. like MUPTI, but more targeted and greater flexibility. So there are currently 2 proposed options that we would like you to consider over the next couple of months. So option 1 is if we do use this policy to encourage market rate development to provide more affordable units, is the percentage of units adequate? And then what kind of target do we want? So here's the 2 options. We would ask the development to provide 15% of their units dedicated to affordable ranges. And then you'll see the identified ranges. This is market-based. Or option 2, which is 15% of those units, but more direct targeted of what we will ultimately incentivize. So what we found in the data is we do need more studio and 1-bedroom apartments to keep up with population growth and demand. So we could go that route, or we could be more broad-based, which is option 1. There are pros and cons to each option. For option 1, the pros is it allows market developers flexibility to meet changing population needs. It puts the onus on the developers. It's broad marketability. We're not trying to box in developers in terms of specific requirements. That's one of the key values that council wants, is like simplicity, but also to meet community need. And then also, if we're just allowing 15% of units with just a general idea of letting the developer identify those units, it could be a lower tax creditable amount. They don't need as much, right? Unlike the Jory Tip District, which was 41 years at $21 million. The cons are developers may over leverage smaller units for the tax credit. So there could be an influx of studio development that then all of a sudden we don't have the 3-bedroom multifamily that may be needed in the future. And then it may not address market affordability per unit needs. So for example, if we over leverage on the studio, they may have to increase some of the rent for 2-3 bedrooms. I mean, there's a policy trade-off. This policy doesn't prevent that, right? And option 2, the pros are it does encourage more diversity of unit types at levels of affordability based on population need and growth. But the cons are it could be a longer term length and higher tax credit. But it also could be more restrictive to market developers who may see this program and say, for example, there's 2 current developments that are happening that are only focused on 2 and 3 bedroom. If we only incentivize studio apartments, they couldn't qualify for this. So these are kind of the ideas that we're currently pondering right now. And just FYI, if you have any additions to these, that's the benefit of this tool. It is very flexible of what the community needs and what you want to recommend to council for borough. So basically, I know this is a lot to take in after all these presentations today, but initially, what are your thoughts on the overall policy? What are your initial thoughts on option 1 and option 2? And then if you want to make a recommendation, what additional information would you like on the options presented today for the next couple of meetings?
There's a whole lot there.
That's as simple as I could get it.
And then I say, excellent, good, you like it. Looking to my left, shockingly seen, okay, there. Yeah.
Thank you, Mandy Dalrymple. Related to a couple of your data points first, the market rate, was that an average dollar amount across all bedroom sizes from studio to 3 bedroom?
Yeah,
The
but I've
1,700
also got it broken down even
Okay.
further than that. But yeah, the 1,700 is
that
average.
across those? Okay. And then your projected units needed, does that take into account any current deficits that we currently, that we have to this point in any of the areas?
So what we assumed is, and this is entirely assumptions, right? So we recently acquired CoStar data on behalf of the city and also Crexi. So we have 2 market data that developers use as well. That number includes current construction and current vacant units, but then it also assumes that we want a community target vacancy rate of 7%. A healthy vacancy rate is between 5 and 10. So I just kind of assumed a good average is 7. The historic average in Bend is 5.6. And if we all just empirically observe the market, the demand is higher than the vacant units that are offered. So it takes in all those.
When you say historical, what years is that covering?
10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
10 years.
Okay. Okay. Related to option 1. If we did go this route, I mean, is there some form of lever that could be built into it that, say we get into the position where like, wow, we have so many students in the market, like, let's pull that lever and like, we pause on those and it has to be one of these 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom type of things.
We can make that an administrative policy. We just have to ask council if they're comfortable with that.
I think that's all my questions.
It seems like it'd be tough just for development.
Yeah.
Because you're drafting all the plans and then changing the game on it. But I hear what you're saying, because you were saying there's no mechanism in place to ward against the over leveraging certain units and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but they still have to get built up, right? Like, people won't build them if they don't get. There are too many, no matter what the incentive is, people aren't just gonna build the units, right?
They're gonna build units based on demand.
Right.
So if there's an oversaturation studio, chances are the performance are gonna shift to a 3 bedroom.
And to those 2 points, staff is not going to get involved in pro forma development with the developers. So we're trying to step back from that. And so that's why we're not trying to be as prescriptive. But we did use those performance to your point of identifying need.
Can you go back to option 2?
Yep.
But I'm gonna ask one more question, and it's probably a dumb question, but there's really data that supports that many studio 1 bedroom apartment needs?
Yeah.
Okay, for some reason that just
Almost seems like Bend is
Surprises
becoming
me.
less family oriented.
Yeah, it surprises me.
So this is multifamily, so I have to be very clear. I don't have the data for single unit family housing. So there's several assumptions we can make, right? Single individuals move here, they end up marrying and buying a house, right? Because if you look at the occupational wages, if you combine those together, it becomes more affordable, right?
Right.
But we can't always assume that somebody's in a family dynamic. Secondly, there are other assumptions of they're staying in Deschutes County, they're just not staying in Bend. That can be both for multifamily and housing. So, and I'll let
I was
Lynn,
just gonna say, one of our fastest growing populations is seniors, and so you're seeing that both with loss of spouse, that's a downsize option. Or just seniors coming to be closer to their family, large growing population, so keep that in mind, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Those are the asterisks that I needed.
Other questions?
Can you clarify? How is demand for the studio 1-bedroom being estimated?
yeah, so we're assuming the ACS average of 39% of all households in Bend renting. That's a historic average since 2017. We're assuming the assumed growth rate and then dividing that by the current household populations per year since 2017. And then also using the target vacancy rate of 7%. So we're using those four assumptions to come to those numbers of need.
Jonathan, can you put it in present?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And how are the households sort of being measured?
That I meant, that's ACS data, so it could be self-reporting as in I'm a roommate and I'm one household member and you still have two people living in the house.
Right.
It's hard to get on a granular level for a city, you know, so.
Just trying to tease out some of the assumptions or perceptions that I have that there's there's more than one person living in the studio 1-bedroom because there are not other options. That's sort of key too. And how would we know that?
It'd be hard to find that out. I mean, there's been floated ideas of having a standard rent application policy that the city could have to help affect it, but that comes to staff resources and administration. Let's see, trying to pull up data. So in using the ACS, the way that we kind of derive some of those numbers is it in the one person household, it'll say householder living alone. And then you elect that, and then we just do the back out numbers of the 2-person household or the 1-person household and see. I can't tell you the relationship dynamic, but if they're identifying that they're living alone, one can assume that they could be roommates or cohabitating. And so that's as far as I can get with our data sets.
There's some heavy assumption.
Yeah.
I guess the trade-off with policy decision one of many is we continue to develop 1-bedroom studio apartments, which people will rent because they don't have other options, and there could be multiple people living there. But for there's affordability and there's availability, right? So even if more units are built, they're available, that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have that situation.
Right.
Right.
Jonathan, do you want to go back to the question slide and just see if there's any kind of, if you have more questions, great, but if there's any kind of consensus on the policy, just in general, are you happy with this incentive kind of policy being pursued? And then any options, if you as a group agree on one or another, or if we want to look into things more and give kind of a preference for an option in the future.
I personally would like to hear what developers think of option 1 and 2 and how are they seeing the trade, because there's trade-offs with of options for sure. So I'd like to hear, you know, from a developer's perspective, which is more workable for them is that being built into this process to sort of get that feedback or has that feedback happened?
I have a sense that Lynn McConnell has an answer.
Hey, and then I'll let Jonathan talk about the real process. One of your roles as a committee can be a conduit for information to bring back from the communities that you represent. So many of you have sort of positions that you represent. So I would encourage you, in addition to whatever Jonathan is saying next, to also go utilize your network and see if you can get folks engaged and paying attention and giving us feedback so that we get a good product in the end. I think that's our goal. And just really encourage you all to get the word out that this is going on. All of this is recorded so folks can watch this presentation or one of the other ones Jonathan has given, and then bring those questions and thoughts back to us, to staff, Jonathan, Rachel, me if needed, or just let us know in the future meetings what you think. I hope that's okay, Jonathan. But that is definitely a role we'd love to see you all help us with.
So to your point, Allison Platt will be scheduling developer stakeholder feedback in July because we're trying to kind of have something for people to chew on. Because originally it was just the idea, and then people were like, how do we put bread or pen to paper on this? So Ally and I met with a couple of housing developers in February, and we talked about some general ideas of implementation. And some were very receptive to targeted unit development, but I don't know if it's as prescriptive as what we presented today. So in full disclosure. But I'm trying to balance the desire of council meeting a community need, what the community actually feels is their own benefit, because that's one thing we heard with the multi-unit tax exemption is it's 120%, right? If you look on paper, people don't necessarily make 120% in the community. And so you have households that are roommates that 1 bedroom, 3 people, you know, they work at Mount Bachelor and there's 3 people living in a 1 bedroom apartment, just making ends meet. So we're trying to balance all that while meeting a community need.
I'm gonna go back to the questions.
I'll take a stab at just what's on the slide here to start it off.
Yes.
Okay. Initial thoughts. One, I need to digest it more, but initial thoughts is I feel decent about the proposal. I would lean probably towards option 1 versus option 2 because it is a little more flexible, and to the point of my other committee members, like the market could direct the fluctuation where it needed to be. And I don't know that I need additional information so much more as I need to dive into it a little deeper to make sure I understand.
Okay.
So a follow-up question to that.
Yeah.
Having spent time diving in, understanding, do you think that our next meeting is a moment that you would want to come back to this, or
Yeah.
once you understand it further, when do you want to talk about it?
I could be ready next meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Ellen or Joanne?
I guess I feel like I personally need more time to understand the whole topic. So I feel like I'm gonna spend some time before the next meeting preparing and thinking more about it.
That's how I feel too. This was really interesting and now my wheels are turning and I just want to do more work on my end, but I don't have any more questions at this time.
Great. Thank you. And we've got more informed opinion. Go ahead.
All right. I just, Allison Platt with the City of Bend Economic Development. I just wanted to add one other consideration for you all to keep in mind as you're evaluating this policy is that this would also be applied within our existing urban renewal areas, including the core area. So as you're thinking about the policy, also make sure that you're thinking about how would it be applied within those existing kind of priority redevelopment areas. And then there's also going to be, we didn't really dive into this with AHAC today, but there would also be an employment path for this site-specific TIF policy that would be available in the way that we're approaching that is it would really incentivize new employment opportunities that provide higher wages. So now we're looking at like 110% average annual wage jobs, trying to incentivize more of those within the community. So just kind of this is the one kind of housing narrow focus piece, but also thinking about how would this be applied within some of those other areas as a part of the equation. So, and I asked Corey Harlan, our core area advisory board chair, to kind of listen into the discussion today, to be thinking about how could this be applied in the core area as well.
Are these other components illustrated in this presentation that you just mentioned, the employment pieces?
We didn't cover those today. We're really reviewing those with BDAB, and then we can kind of bring kind of the full package. I mean, looking at Lynn, but we can bring that full package for you all so you understand, like, there's the housing path, the employment path. I think we'd also like to develop almost like a mixed use path for this program, for mixed use developments. And then again, thinking about how is this going to be applied both within like Juniper Ridge and the core area in particular. So it's
Allie,
a
do
lot.
you think you could send some upcoming dates where this presentation will happen again to Dina, and maybe Dina could send that if you all want to do some studying in the meantime? Thank you.
And we're available for one-on-ones because we can actually get into more specifics. I have been directed many times to stay high level because I get very involved in the details. So the financial models is flexible. It's a good tool that if you want to learn how to use it, we could do that.
Anyone else like to share their thoughts on the slide?
Yeah, so I love it. And as a developer of affordable housing, it is very, very difficult. And so if you want to get market rate developers to do affordable housing, you should keep it as simple as possible and give them as much flexibility as possible to see if it works, in my opinion.
I'll jump in. I agree with Jeff. I agree with Mandy. This opens it up for everybody, and that's really cool. Putting barriers in place, in my opinion, because of fear, is just going to make it less accessible, and that's not the purpose of this. I like option one because it's more flexible. You know, chances are, common sense dictates that if 800 people come and start developing a bunch of studio apartments, they'll switch because they're not gonna be able to rent them. It's just not gonna pencil. That being said, if 800 people do come and build studio apartments, chances are they're gonna have more studio apartments on the same site, therefore 15% equates to more units. That's a win-win. I like option one. But I'd be curious to find out what developers have to say. Because ultimately they're the ones that are going to be pursuing.
Well, and it opens things up to not just developers, which is you touched on one thing I like about it too.
All right. Seeing no others, let's. Thank you very much for the presentation.
So we'll be back in July. Yeah, that's the direction. Okay.
Sounds like it.
Yep, I think so. Thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah.
Does anyone here on the committee have a hard stop at 5? Okay, then let's go for an expeditious shelter report.
So quick.
And we'd love to hear from both Brooke and also me.
And I'm gonna go ahead and hand these out. We're gonna talk just briefly about the pets. Yeah, Brooke O'Keefe, shelter coordinator. So just to ground us in the point in time town, in Central Oregon, 1,800 people are experiencing houselessness on any given night. This is a 10% increase since 2023. 53% of the region's houseless population, or 959 people, live in Bend, which is a 5% decrease for Bend. So Deschutes County as a whole saw a decrease, whereas other areas in the region saw an increase. 66% of our houseless population are surviving unsheltered in the region. It's 55% for the city of Bend. And 40% of Central Oregon's houseless population are experiencing chronic houselessness. This means that they've been houseless for at least a year or longer, and they have a disabling condition. So a year or longer, or multiple periods over the last few years that equal 12 months. And then in Bend, there's 523 shelter beds. 216 of those are low barrier, and that includes Lighthouse Navigation Center, Franklin Avenue Shelter, and Stepping Stone. Which means on any given night, if the 59 people who are identified as experiencing houselessness in January were to access shelter, we are 436 beds short.
I think it's really important to recognize that in that 959, that's not just in Bend proper, which I didn't understand until last week. That also includes China Hat and parts of Juniper Ridge. And so that trend, that decrease of 5% is really even more substantial. And so we are definitely trending in the right direction, or we would hope that we would. One of the many things that AHAC has taken on in the last couple of years has been supporting shelter. And we just want to say thank you as part of the continuum. We see that homelessness or houselessness is right there. And then that emergency shelter that all of you have been instrumental in moving forward in our community. So the lighthouse under renovation for 9 months now. We are on track to move back in early fall. This is our only low barrier walk-up shelter in Bend. You guys know they go up to 137 people and it's been really cold and we've had to operate in 3 different locations right now. So it has been a huge strain on Shepherd's House, and we're very grateful that they have been able to keep those beds available in less than ideal circumstances. We are replacing the roof, HVAC, flooring, lighting, and then adding a commercial kitchen. If you'll recall, the thrift store had just a staff room, basically. And so we're really excited about that commercial kitchen, laundry, multi-user bathrooms, and of course, showers. We did meet yesterday with Family Kitchen, who you may be aware is needing to find new digs. And we are very excited that they are exploring with Shepherd's House using that commercial kitchen and providing meals out of that space. And so we'll continue to support those conversations, but it might be the best scenario for the community as a whole. So we're grateful to both parties and their willingness to look at this space and use it. We have a bunch of stuff in front of council that Brooke's going to run through real quick, and then we'll get out of your hair unless there are questions.
On June 20th, we have quite a few items that are going to council. They're all on the consent agenda. We talked last month about the acceptance of the CIC 5511 award that will fully fund operations of the Franklin Avenue shelter through this next fiscal year, so June 30th, 2025. We are also, well, we as in real estate is also bringing a lease agreement because they've done all the work with a no cost for this facility because that CIC grant covers the cost of the facility's expenses, as well as a contract amendment to align with that new grant, which will increase the not to exceed to 2.3 million and extend the dates to June 30th, 2025. In addition, we are also bringing a lease agreement for the Lighthouse Navigation Center. So it'll be a little over $5,000 a month, and that will cover the cost of facilities related expenses, as well as a contract amendment to increase their not to exceed to 5.2. As you guys probably recall, the budget for the Lighthouse was built on 80 people a night and 40 people accessing daytime services. They're consistently over 100 people a night and serving the average of 340 people. 340 for daytime services each month.
Unique individuals.
Yeah. And then Stepping Stone, we're also bringing a lease agreement, which will cover the cost of the facility's expenses as well. And then a contract amendment is also being worked on for that for Stepping Stone, which does not require council approval, which is why it isn't on this list. As we've been looking at city funding for shelters, if there's no additional funding from OHS for fiscal year 2025, we are assuming that city funds will run out in the winter of 2024-25. If OHS continues to fund at the rate that they did in fiscal year 24, which is about 80% for Stepping Stone and around 54% for Lighthouse, the city the city funding will last until December of 2025. Yes. Getting my numbers mixed up. So December
December of
2024.
Next year.
Yeah.
Yes. So December 2024, if there's no more OHCS funding, December
If there
25,
is.
if there
Okay.
is, yeah.
Thank you.
So it's the end of the fiscal year. We're getting towards the new fiscal year, and OHCS has not provided us with a number or a funding mechanism for the shelters moving forward. We're continuing to meet with them on a regular basis and essentially beg them for information so we can help support our partners in planning and continuing what is a vital and successful service for moving people into more permanent housing. And so these numbers are in the slides a little alarming. We're working towards getting something more definitive, but it could be grim.
Are there ways that it would be useful for this body to advocate for those outcomes? I think we're all agreed those are positive outcomes.
I think it might be helpful to, and Lynn.
Gotta get those steps
Yeah.
I wore heels today. What the
Yeah.
heck? So your role as an advisory body to council is to advise council. So if you would like to have these things happen, that's your method, is just ensuring that council knows AHAC is fully supportive of continuing the shelter programs and ensuring that there's viable funding and staffing and all of that.
And remind me, what is the cycle of the budget committee? So it'll be a new.
Yep,
new
so
process.
we are about to turn over fiscal years in the middle of the biennium. Our next biennial budget is starting to get prepared like any minute. It's kind of wild, but we're a year away from actually implementing that. So that's sort of how we're going forward. We're continuing to work with the state very closely and with partners really across the state. The wonderful thing is I think we've all sort of leaned into this crisis enough that people are, number one, aware. And number two, we've seen this really cool collection of advocates all sort of coming at the state, frankly, with the same thing. This is what we need, and this is what it needs to look like. Let's go. And that's a huge opportunity. It's very rare to have everybody on the same page about anything, really. So that's been cool. And I think I'm feeling optimistic that that we'll get there with the support of the governor and the legislature, but we've already been starting those discussions as well.
But there could be opportunities for AHAC to advocate. with
So
the
I think
budget
council would
process.
have to give you permission to advocate outside of the city. That typically does
No, no,
not happen.
not the city.
Oh, yeah, within council, yes, absolutely. Thank you.
And
Sorry.
if you give us 7.5 minutes, we'll give you an opportunity to do that.
Run, Megan, run. Just kidding.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. And here, let's do staff report.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I wanted to start with a first round of hello to a new member that'll be joining us very soon. We have a second Ian joining us, which is really exciting. So I haven't said this to you yet, but I've said this to the other Ian. We've got to come up with some better nicknames than me just winging it, because what I have is not appropriate at all. It tends to be like big, little, new, old, and old's never good, all those things. So help me with that. But welcome Ian, we're thrilled to have you on the committee. With that, we also have some turnover in that we are at our sort of end of fiscal year, which means it's time for chair elections as well. So we gave you all the heads up for this. This is one that I think staff are going to be running rather than having Ian do it. But what I'd like to do is ask you all for nominations for co-chairs going forward. It would be a one-year term. You could self-nominate or you can nominate anyone else. Nominate, second, and then vote. That's how it's going to work. So let's first do nominations, either self-nominations or each other. Who would like to serve as a co-chair? Not Martino. You can't nominate yourself.
No, so can I make a nomination?
Absolutely.
I would like to nominate Mamie Dalrymple to the vice chair position.
Okay. Thank you. Any second? Well, let's just get all the nominations out first, actually, instead of seconding first. Anybody else?
feel free to nominate yourselves, all of you.
Do we need to? Are we renominating, Ian?
If you choose so, and would like him to continue serving in this role, yeah.
I would like to nominate Ian.
Okay.
For chair.
Second.
Any other nominations for chair roles or thoughts? Anybody dying to? We will always have opportunity for you to check in with council, even if you're not in one of these positions. So not a problem. Okay. So with that, let's start with a vote for Ian as chair. Everybody in favor, raise your hand. I think that looks good. You can vote for yourself. I think the rules are pretty soft here if you'd like to.
I'll abstain.
Okay. And Helen and Joanna, I'm sorry, I wasn't looking at the screen. Okay, Cena's got you. Thank you. All right, and second, Mandy as co-chair. Everybody in favor? All right, unanimous. Congratulations, you two. Thank you. We also have a sad day in that this is Matt Martino's last meeting. And Matt, you have served on this committee since 2018. And been through the ringer with us on some of these issues. I was kind of chuckling a little about this loan versus grant thing coming back today, because I feel like that's the one that you followed for a very long way in particular, and so this almost felt full circle. We so appreciate your time on this committee, all you have done, the extra stuff that you have done, coming to subcommittee meetings around loan terms, going to committee council check-ins, helping, collect information from the community. And one of my personal favorite things about you is that you always have a calculator in your pocket. I love that. Love that.
Oh, that's a real estate master.
There we go. We will miss that. I will miss that calculator, but hopefully you'll come back and give us a hard time. With that, we did, staff got a little card for you, and then we have a nice little token. Maybe I shouldn't say it's a nice little token. It's a token. You can choose if it's a nice thing. And feel free to open that up and take a look if you would like to.
Pressure's on us. We'll start with the public.
Thank you, everybody, very much. I appreciate this. It's been an absolute honor to be able to be a part of this committee. I still remember the intake meeting with Councilor Campbell and Mayor Casey Rhodes at the time upstairs. So that was, been through a lot. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, guys. Oh, wow. That's got some weight to it.
Yeah, it's not yet smudged, but
It's all smudged now.
Bring it, it's well loved.
Yeah, and my kids are gonna get a hold of this.
Yeah, no, I bet.
Yeah.
Forward to seeing you for public comment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think I'll.
When I see your hand up, I'm gonna raise it.
I'm just kidding. Yeah. I'll have to make up some different names to come at you, but no, thank you guys. You guys have your work cut out for you, for sure. I don't think that this is ever going to stop, which is a much needed committee. God, I had a bunch of stuff I was gonna say, but I don't even remember what it was.
We
Just
can go
thank
back
you.
to.
Yeah, it's fine.
Think of it.
No, it's good. Thank you.
We
Thank you.
appreciate you,
Thank
Matt.
you.
Thank you for all your time and service for the community.
See you later.
Yeah.
So tree code, y'all heard a little bit about from John earlier. That is going for hearing to council next week, the 20th. And so just wanted to, I think as we sort of had collected and gotten our legs under us as a committee with a handful of new members, weren't engaging in that one as much because it was a pretty extensive process. Kathy Austin, former member, sort of represented the affordability or need for affordable housing on that committee, but did want y'all to know that that's out there, June 20th. Please feel free to attend and watch. In addition, we have the committee council check-in on the 17th of July. And so also for new members, that is our quarterly opportunity to check in with council, let them know if there's things that you all want to work on. They can let you know what they'd like you to work on, etc. And we've been recently focusing on specific topics each quarter. This next topic is growth and growth management. Where do we go from here with growth in Bend? So it'll be a really good one for y'all to sit in on. Feel free to just listen if you want. But in the meantime, if anyone wants the opportunity to communicate with council on behalf of AHAC, there are volunteer opportunities for that. It would start around probably 3 o'clock on July 17th. And as you all know, if you're interested in being there, staff will write talking points for you, make sure you're prepped and do everything we can to make you comfortable being there. So totally optional, but that is an option to consider. Anybody interested in coming on the 17th?
What day is that?
Wednesday.
I could do that.
Awesome. Thanks, Tony. Perfect. We'll be in touch. Yeah. Couple other things going on. We have been hosting meetings galore. I feel like a tour guide. I have been a tour guide. We had the House Housing Committee, a number of legislators from Oregon House Housing Committee come out and talk with us about shelter, about affordable housing, and about how to increase production generally. So they kicked off what is now supposedly going to be a tour series that they're doing around the state, but we are sort of their shining star in terms of housing production and our focus on affordability. And so they really wanted to start here. It was a great event, really lots of thanks to the partners out there for helping host us and putting up with us as we went. We also have LCDC, which is the governing body, this is word soup, acronym soup. LCDC is the governing body of DLCD. DLC is the Department of Land Conservation and Development. That's our state agency in charge of land use, basically. So Nick Lilac, who's the county administrator, is on that committee, but about to drop off. And so they're having their last meeting here at the end of this month. It's mostly going to be in Barn Sawyer at the county room, the 27th and 28th, which is Thursday, Friday. Really interesting stuff that may come up. And then there's also a couple of us that will be talking, which are probably going to be less interesting to you, but there is sort of a local leader land use panel that may be worth tuning into Friday midday. So keep an eye out. We'll send out more info. And then USICH, the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, something like that. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Is also coming to visit us. The director of that, I think, is Katie. Katie is the director. Is that right?
West Coast.
West Coast director. And they're doing tours and discussions, et cetera. And so that's actually also on the 20th, roughly. But so you may see some media around that. So we're really doing a lot, leaning in with partners, federal and state, to get this work done. I think the last thing I had is to just let you all know about an award that our Lighthouse Navigation Center received. Are you okay with me jumping in, or do you want to? Okay, one of you, Brooke, do you want to say anything about it, or? Okay, it was called the Health Heroes Award, and really just recognition of how that facility helps folks in their sort of healthcare generally, because we know that there are people in there who are essentially on hospice. There's people with major medical conditions that are released from the hospital, and that's where they can go. We do some respite, working on that a little bit more, and also just the ability to keep your medicines cold, have stability, and know how to care for yourself in a safe environment is one of the things that facility does. So really great to be recognized, I'd say, to have them be recognized for sort of the healthcare element that they're providing in the continuum. Did I get that remotely right?
Yes, and they were nominated by Colleen Sinsky, which was also nice to be recognized within their own provider community. And so, yeah, you can follow on.
Colleen, you know, is the director of the FUSE program, Frequent User System Engagement. So pretty cool. So we congratulate the Lighthouse staff as well for all the incredible work they're doing, which is not easy, as you all know. It is a tough job, and they do it with a lot of grace. So anything else? Did I miss staff or public comment? Or for staff report? Sorry. Where are we? What day is it? Are we starting out or ending?
Let's get this meeting started.
Yeah, right. I think Heather's.
I'm just reflecting on the developer sort of use cases that were brought to our attention today and some of the requests for consideration. Is it possible to get some sort of, I don't want to use the term reaction from the city on some of these ideas, but some sort of evaluation of what was proposed? And they ran the gambit, I feel, from perhaps more simple code changes to or waivers to what Harry Brooks potentially shared with the city as property owners and et cetera. But I guess what are the next steps with us hearing more from the city about the feasibility some of this. Do we need to go ask council for the city to?
So, good question. It's sort of topic specific. Carrie's been working on some of these things with her sort of various groups. And so my thought is, and stop me if I'm going wrong on this, if there were any topics that you heard that you'd like to work on potentially or find out more, let us know. And then we can sort of triage those and determine, okay, this one we need council permission for, this one we may be able to do some staff work to get you guys a little bit more info before we would ask council, etc. But because it was such a long list of things, that's probably what I would suggest is if there were items in there that are of particular interest to let us know. I don't think that needs to happen today. I think that can happen via email as well, but we can set up additional discussions about that. Carrie, does that sound okay?
Yeah, I think that we do have that running list. There were a couple folks that shared today. Those items are on the list. Those items are being tackled by an internal group, as well as consideration for some other action by the city manager's office. So I think that, yeah, if you want to see what's currently being tackled, and then you got information on that lovely list that Perry Brooks and David Mosey brought, those are more innovative ideas we haven't seen yet, if that makes sense. But the other items that were brought to the table are things that attack the middle income attack, which Allison and Matt have served on, are things we've been really plugging away at. So yes, and to quickly answer, there are some that we see as very viable solutions.
One of the financing options that David was talking about, likely from an initial discussion with our bond council, likely would require a public vote. So that's a whole big lift that's kind of different. However, over the next number of months, we will be beginning the council goal setting process. It's really hard to imagine, but we do have an election in November, and so we will have at least a somewhat different council, because at least one person has said they're not returning. So with that new council, we start goal setting in like September. They're not even elected yet. But we're doing surveys in the community, talking to you all about what you think is most important to focus on. And so that may be the channel for some of those bigger ideas, is really like, hey, we'd love the permission to dig in and see if there's something here. Can we put that in the council goal framework? And I think we had talked about, though this isn't solid, having September maybe be the meeting with you all where we really kick off that council goal discussion and what topics may be of most interest to you. So Matt, put that on your schedule for public comment. We'll see you then, maybe.
Sounds good.
Does that sound okay to folks in terms of, and then definitely as you review some of that info, send staff emails, let us know what questions you have, what you want more info on, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think it would just simply be interesting to see sort of the results of the feasibility work that is happening right now, so we can see like, oh yeah, this was explored and this is viable, this is not. And
yeah, agreed.
Because then we don't spend time like saying, oh, this is a great idea, you should go pursue it. It's like,
yes,
it's not.
We don't advocate for something that's not viable.
Right.
Or there's a regulatory prohibition against that, or something.
Okay.
It's just
Yeah.
red tape.
That's a
It's
good
just red
statement.
tape.
That's our magic spot,
Yeah.
right? Like the red tape.
We've got those.
Right, exactly. So yeah, that sounds like a really reasonable place to start, as like, what do we think might be feasible? Yeah.
But again, if something striked you that you're passionate about, please email us so that we can get you information right away and continue the discussion.
Having nothing else on the agenda, and thank you all very much for the additional time that you gave us. I believe this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you. Pleasure. Yeah.